Shalom and welcome to Kehilat Mussar. I am Rabbi Chasya Uriel Steinbauer, founder and guiding teacher of Kehilat Mussar, where our purpose is to learn and practice Mussar together to grow to be better people in service of God and others. Thank you for joining us today. This is the second video in a series of our 40 days of Elul practice. We are in the month of Elul in the Jewish calendar, where we essentially are preparing for the high holiday season, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in order to do teshuvah, in order to turn to God, in order to transform. And how we do that is a daily practice in Mussar, but we specifically began together a week ago, starting to develop enthusiasm and momentum where we recognize the opportunity and responsibility of this time, of the upcoming holiday period. This week is critical, this past week, to put ourselves into a very positive and hopeful state. So how did we seek to do that, if you recall? By chanting, by moving, by doing sun salutation, by singing, by playing, by any way that moves the energy in us and penetrates our hearts, enters the soul. So we did a specific Mussar practice of chanting and singing, and we took a lovely Israeli tune and applied Psalm 27, Kaf Zayin, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, Hashem Ori veYish'i," and we sang it. And we moved, and I even included a short video to have you join me in practice as I marched around my house. So I hope you had a chance to join us. Do share with us what you did practice, how you put yourself in a very positive state. And then we decided to engage in a cheshbon hanefesh journaling practice, an accounting of the soul practice. And how do we do that? We wrote down our strengths and where we have grown this past year. So I really have grown a lot in rachamim and compassion for myself this past year. And that was very important because there was this critical voice. And I would say to myself in my Heshbon HaNefesh journal, whose voice is this? Because it's not mine. And so I worked on it daily. And I'm able to grow in that this past year. So share what your strengths are and how you grew. Then we looked at start thinking in general about our vision for the upcoming year. It's very important to have something in mind, something you want to work on, something where you know that you are ready to commit to change. And the final thing is to focus on an area of strength and act on it with gusto. So because I have more compassion for myself, I'm able to have more compassion for others. I often think, how would I want to be treated in that moment? And that's how I treat the other person. I now have a space between the match and the fuse. And that's what's very important, what we want to develop in our Mussar practice. So here we are, starting week 2 together in our 40 days of Elul practice. So what are we doing this week? We are going to develop and strengthen our relationship with Hashem, with the Almighty, with the Creator, with God, with the Holy One, with whomever whatever name or title you want to apply to God, whatever she or he means to you. We're going to strengthen that relationship where our goal is to become much more aware of God, much more aware. So, how do we do this in Mussar? How do we begin? We're going to engage in the practice of visualization. Very important Mussar practice. So you may wonder, well, what is visualization? How do I do it? Where do I begin? So I will give you a brief summary of what we have to say about it in Mussar, and then we'll look into engaging and practice together today. So Mussar distinguishes between two types of basically aspects of the mind: the sechel, which is the intellect, the part of the mind that controls rational thought, distinguishing between tov and ra, good and evil, good and bad. And then there's the dimion, our wonderful imagination. And this is the part that has the advantage over sechel to create a picture in our mind's eye. And it's a much more powerful tool as a practice tool of transformation. It can affect us deeply in our inner self. The altar of Kelm, it's a school of Mussar. There were traditionally 3 schools of Mussar, and Kelm was one of them. And he has a wonderful saying, actually, where he would ask his students, what's the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, between a righteous person and an evil person? And the answer is so interesting. He said, the righteous person has the ability to imagine, meaning one can create pictures in one's mind much more so and better than the other. It's like, what pictures do they have in their mind? And that's amazing. If you think about what pictures we're given from childhood forward, and then what we can create in our mind either to escape that childhood or to reinforce it, it's a very powerful tool. Sometimes it's only the way that children survive. So, Rav Shlomo Walby, another wonderful Mussar teacher, born in 1914 and died in 2005, may his memory be for a blessing, he also felt that changing midot, that the whole concept of soul traits and personality traits, however you want to call them, that they really are a paradigm, and that we must picture in our mind's eye where we want to be and who we want to be in order to really engage in Mussar practice. So visualizations are all about having and experiencing a strong inner experience of an idea so that it's a sensory experience, experiential. So there's 2 ways that Mussar uses these. One is for a difficult or abstract lesson in order to teach ourselves something that we really can't get intellectually. So, like for instance, there's a famous one from Rav Eliyahu Dessler, where he was also a student of the Kelm School of Mussar, where he wanted to teach the concept of eternity. And so he used this visualization of basically a mountain of sand and a bird coming every 1,000 years to just take 1 grain away, and actually visualizing that for quite a long time, like sitting meditation doing it, in order to teach that difficult lesson, in order to internalize so that you begin to actually have a real concept of eternity. Mussar also uses visualizations to prepare for moral challenges. And so when you know you're going to go through a difficult situation, you picture that situation in your mind's eye, and you basically live through the experience before it happens. So we know in Mussar practice, if you do this repeatedly, that it will leave a trace on your soul and affect transformation. So how are we going to do that today? We're actually going to engage in visualizing something quite positive, maybe something abstract and difficult to imagine, which is our relationship with God and how to develop it and get closer. Or really start to develop that relationship. It's very important, especially during the 40 days of Elul, but in general. So, what do I want to begin sharing with you? So, visualization, guided imagery, sometimes known as, right? It really is a form of meditation, often in literature if you read and learn about it. So I do want to say in everyday life, athletes are quite known for visualization also, where it's part of their training and preparation. They'll close their eyes and focus on a specific skill set or a move, for an instance, like picturing the perfect dive with that kind of knife-like entrance into the water, or visualizing crossing the finish line. Very important to practice. It's also very important to, like we said, to achieve something, whether it be sport, everyday life, or healing the body. Studies have shown that sick patients who make positive visualizations about recovering and healing actually heal faster than those who don't visualize. So what are we going to do today? We are going to sit comfortably together in a meditation posture. So please make yourself comfortable. Try to have some alone time. If you're sitting and listening to this on the subway or on a bus, try to have a moment where you can begin into a comfortable meditation posture. I'm going to sit on my meditation cushion. And we're going to close our eyes if you prefer, if you feel safe. And the first thing we're going to do is observe our breathing. And we're just going to note where it is. You want to notice if your in-breath is longer than your out-breath, or your out-breath is longer than your in. Let's take a few minutes. Now you may feel your mind wander. Just bring it back to your breath. You may also begin to notice, where do you feel your breath? Where do you feel tightness? Allow the breath to enter that area and release. This is what you're going to want to do each day. If you want to watch the video again and go through this practice together, you can. After we observe our breathing, we acknowledge each inhale, bringing energy into our body, and exhaling that energy to release to others. We be mindful of this breathing for several minutes, and then we are going to think in our mind's eye a time from your childhood or young adult years if you are older. Maybe you are a young adult now. A time where you felt God's presence, where you knew you were in relationship, where you knew God was there. Think back to that time. This is where the visualization will begin. It can be, I want you to picture the place. I want you to picture if there are other people there. I want you to picture the weather. I want you to picture the sounds and the smells. You bring that vision of that time of God's presence into your mind space. You see it in its entirety. So take a minute to find that time where I recall God. I recall God's presence. I recall God being there with me. Bring up that image in its entirety. You can even rotate that image. Maybe even have yourself as an observer walking around that image, looking at it from all angles. Touch it with your mind's hand. Smell it with your mind's nose. Spend time with it in a safe space. Take that time now. feel where you feel that relationship with God in your body. When you are visualizing that time where you felt in a sensory, real way, that time, that presence with God, feel where you feel it in your body. We always have muscle memory of things that happen. Locate it. You'll redirect your focus to your body as I'm doing right now, and what you are feeling as you envision this presence of God. Note it, acknowledge it. At the end of this, when you are ready, you will take 3 deep cleansing breaths. And you'll repeat it. This is our daily practice for the next week of our second week of the 40 days of Elul practice. Take 5 minutes a day where you really sit and do this visualization of your last memory of the presence of God, of your relationship with God, and feel it. If you have any questions or concerns, please call me, put in comments below, email us at kehilatmussar@gmail.com. Feel free to private message, and I will do my best to get back to you. I wish you strength, I wish you joy, keeping our positive state, connecting with God, becoming much more aware of our relationship with God. Thank you for joining us today. This is Kehilat Mussar.